Fossils are fantastic. When you look beneath your feet and you see the remains of seashells or bones or plant leaves, it brings to mind all kinds of questions about our Earth and about the past. What was life like back then? What kinds of plants were there? What did the animals look like? What did the Earth look like? Did it look the same as it does today, or did it look different? Was it warm or was it cold? Has it changed over time? So who would we talk to find out the answers to those kinds of questions? Well, if we wanted to know about ancient human life, we would probably want to talk to an archaeologist because they look at old pots and building sites and places where people have lived. But they're focused more on people. If we want to know what it was like when the dinosaurs were alive, then we would talk to a paleontologist. Even if we wanted to know what happened before the dinosaurs, we would still be talking to a paleontologist who's looking at tiny fossilized fragments inside of the rocks. Okay, so what tools does a paleontologist need to do their job? The first thing we're going to look at is safety gear. And to do this, we're going to do a little activity, and I would like you to follow along with me. So you're going to need some supplies. The first thing you need is a big sheet of paper or a piece of poster board that you can draw on. And you'll also need some crayons or some markers. If you need to pause the video so you can go get those things, go ahead and do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, are you ready? Do you have your materials ready and at hand? If so, I'd like you to go ahead and draw a stick figure. Now, you'll notice that on mine, I don't give mine a face or anything until we get a little further in and I know what gear we're going to be wearing. So you might want to wait, or you might want to go ahead and do that. The first thing that I'm going to put on my fossil hunter is a pair of boots, because I know that when we go to look for fossils, we're going to be walking across some rough terrain. Probably going to be pretty rocky where we're going. So boots are always a safe bet because they lace up tight around your ankles and give you a lot of support. The next thing that I like to have with me anytime I go outside for an adventure is a flashlight. Even on a really bright sunny day, flashlights always come in handy for looking in holes or looking under rocks. Flashlights are great. You also need some water and probably some food. So not a candy bar, but maybe some dried fruit or some trail mix in case you end up being out longer than you thought you'd be. A wide-brimmed hat or a hard hat is an important part of the gear for a paleontologist. If they're working out in the desert and it's really bright and sunny, they want a big, wide hat that provides some sun protection. If you're in the mountains, though, or next to a cliff and there might be rocks coming down from above, that's when you need to have a hard hat with you with a chin strap that would go under your chin. We also want to be aware that we're dressing for the weather, and depending on where we're at, that might change. If you're hunting for fossils next to a nice sunny beach or in the desert or on a hot summer day, you might want to wear cooler clothing. But on a winter day or cool day, you're going to want to dress more warmly. The other thing we need to keep in mind is where we're collecting the fossils. So even here in Pennsylvania, on a hot sunny day that's really bright, we still need to wear long pants and we need to wear tall socks. Does anybody know why? That's right, ticks. So tall socks, long pants, and keeping that in mind, you also need to have your bug spray and your sunscreen with you. Another good thing to have are safety goggles. So give me just a second while I put mine on. Oh, that's better. Now, you don't need to wear those all of the time. The safety goggles, really you only need to wear when you're using a tool. So anytime you pick up a tool like a hammer or a chisel to work in the rock, that's when you need to have the safety goggles on. You also need to know the area where you're going. Is it a place where you need to be concerned about high tide and low tide? Or are you in a place where there might be rattlesnakes? Could there be poison ivy in the area or nests of bees? Think about the other hazards that might be involved with where you're going. Another hazard might be being close to the road. So keep those things in mind while you're planning your trip. So now that we have all of our safety gear on, if we're a paleontologist, where do we go and how do we know what we found? So the first thing we need with us is a map, so we know where we're going. Now we might have those maps in a digital form on a GPS unit, but we're also still going to have our paper map with us and a compass to help orient us. Sometimes the places we go to look for fossils are very remote and we don't have access to the best cell service or the best electronics device communication. So we still want to have the standard map and compass with us as well. Next are field guides. You'll want a nice little field guide that fits in your pocket. At home, though, you're going to have even more books to help you identify fossils. The field guide that you pick to take with you should probably be one with drawings or sketches of different kinds of fossils, so you know what shape to look at. If you're looking at one with lots of really pretty pictures, those are pictures of fossils that have already been prepared for museums, and you don't find something in a rock outdoors that looks like those. There's a lot of work between digging it out of the ground and taking that nice picture that has been done to it to get it to look that way. So a field guide with sketches and drawings are your best bet if you want to take something with you into the field. You also want a camera. Again, you can use your cell phone for this, but something that you can take a picture of the area with. You want to take a picture of the surroundings. You might want to take a close-up of the fossil in the rock before you try to remove it or before you try to get it out. Another thing you probably want to do is to join a club that has trips and meetings planned, so you have some friends to go with you. And I didn't have room in my picture to add some friends in, but hopefully in your picture you have room to put some friends in with you, put some adults and some other friends with you that are going to go fossil collecting, and that will serve as your group, because you always want to go in a group. You never want to go out by yourself without telling anybody where you're going. So you want to have some friends with you when you go. You also need some word of mouth. If you join a club, you'll find that lots of people will be happy to tell you where they found nice fossils in the past or where to go to find certain things. And always remember, this is very important, you must get permission. Make sure you know who owns the land and that you're not trespassing when you go to look for fossils. What tools does a paleontologist use? What do you need? And now we're going to really get into the tools and the equipment that you're going to be using when you start to dig out the fossils. So the first thing you need is a shovel, and that's my handy dandy little shovel there. You might need a shovel to dig out some rocks or to dig some dirt away from the rock you want to look at. You might need a hammer and a chisel, like we've added down there in the bottom corner. Hammers are really important to hit the chisel, but even just a hammer by itself without a chisel is pretty important as well. You might need a rock pick. We put that in our other hand here. Rock picks are good at digging out, tricky rocks to get another rock out. Brushes. And I put in two different kinds of brushes here, one that's kind of like a scrub brush and one that's more like a paint brush. And we're going to add some other brushes later that are even tinier than this for what you do when you get home. But if you find a fossil or something you think is a fossil and you want to make sure that the dirt is off of it, you might want to pour a little bit of water out of your water bottle and really scrub it to make sure that you've gotten all of the dirt off of it and you know what you're looking at before you start to dig and chisel and try to get the rock out. So once you get your fossil, how are you going to get it home? And down here we have newspapers. Newspapers are good to read when you first get them, but before you throw them out, save them and recycle them. You can use old newspapers to wrap your wrap your fossils in as you dig them out, and that provides them with a layer of protection. So that way they're not bumping against each other, and hopefully they won't break before you get them home. How are you going to carry all of this stuff with you? I think we've run out of pockets by now. So you're going to need a backpack, and probably a backpack with some pretty good space in it too, because you're going to need to also be able to put whatever you find in those. So a backpack or two come in handy for helping to carry all of the equipment, but also for carrying the fossils you might find. Once you get your fossil home, there are a few more things that we need to do. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to clean your fossil, maybe with some dental picks and some fine brushes. So dental picks are good at getting down and cleaning out the fine detail. So those pictures of nice museum quality fossils that we saw before in our field guides that aren't really handy to take out into the field, those were prepared with dental picks and fine brushes to make them really stand out of the rock that they are in. You might need to use glue to stabilize them, or if anything has broken off of your fossil, to reconnect any broken pieces. You might need a collector's box that you can label. Make sure that when you label your fossils that you put the date and the location where you found it, as well as your best identification possible. So whatever you have researched and figured out your fossil is, make sure you put your best identification on there. That way, if anybody looks at your collection later, or you're showing it off to people in your club, you can tell them where you found things and what they are. Now we're back to safety again. There are a few things that we passed up the first time we looked at safety, and these are two very simple things that you need to keep in mind when you go outdoors. One is how to pick up a rock. And I know everybody thinks you just do it like you do in the first picture where it says, uh-oh, where you just pick the rock up. But underneath that rock, we have a little slithery snake. If you just pick the rock up and say, hi, buddy, it might bite you, it might run away. You don't know because it's scared. And when you find an animal that's scared, they have two responses. They're either going to fight or they're going to flee. And so in the first picture at the top, that's kind of an uh-oh. It could do either one, 50-50. We don't know what it's going to do. In the middle picture, where it says yikes, we've picked up the rock, so it's tilted towards us. And in this circumstance, there's nowhere for the snake to go except towards us. And so if it's scared, its only choice is to fight. And we don't want to bother the snake, and we don't want the snake to bother us. So what we're actually going to do is in the bottom close, we're going to lean over and we're going to pull the rock up from the far edge so that anything that's underneath it has the rock between us and them. And in that case, their reaction is usually to flee. Even if they would try to fight, it would run into the rock before it would get to us. So we always want to pick the rock up and tilt it away from us. Now we want to make sure that our buddy and our rock club friends are not on the other side. Now in the second picture where it says observe your surroundings, we have somebody looking for fossils on a nice gentle slope. And if anybody's there and yells rock, he's going to be able to move to either side, get out of the way pretty easily. The bottom picture is a problem. You never want to go rock collecting or fossil collecting under an overhang. So if you're in there and you're digging with a rock hammer or a chisel and some rocks let loose, they could come down on your head. So always make sure that your head is clear, that there's nothing above your head whenever you're going to look for fossils. Make sure that you have a nice slope and a place where you can get out of the way. So how do fossils form? Well, the first thing that has to happen is the animal dies and is buried under layers of soil or mud and clay. And they have to be left undisturbed for a very long period of time. These sediments over time turn into rock, and the rock hardens. And as that process is happening, the minerals are replacing the calcium deposits in the bones and the seashells. Hard parts fossilize best, so there's definitely a bias in the fossil record. Seashells, bones, teeth, things that are hard and made from calcium tend to fossilize much better than soft parts do. So we're going to look at a few example fossils here. And this first one is a megalodon tooth. Megalodons were about 60-foot long sharks. You can see that megalodon tooth is in my hand, and it's a pretty good size next to my hand. So they had really big teeth. You can also see in this the gum line of the tooth and the root of the tooth where the megalodon, where it was down in the jaw of the megalodon. Next, we have fossilized bone. The key that you're looking for here is a very porous structure. You'll see there are lots of little holes in it. The holes are a lot different than pumice, which is a rock you may have learned about if you did our rock video earlier. But the porous side is the inside of the bone. Seashells are another very common fossil. These happen to be brachiopod fossils. This is actually the same fossil, the front and back of the same fossil in this picture. And they're kind of fan-shaped. So if you find a seashell and you can see ridges and it looks like a fan, those are probably brachiopods. If it looks like a rainbow, those are probably clams or mussel. Then we also have a trilobite fossil here. Trilobites are special because they are Pennsylvania state fossil, and they are the first animal to show evidence of eyes in the fossil record. We have a small one in the top corner, which is about the size we normally find here in Pennsylvania. But trilobites at one time actually grew to over 6 feet long during the Silurian period. Next, we have some plant fossils. Plant fossils are the same as animal fossils in that hard parts fossilize best. So the hardest part of any plant is wood. So petrified wood is a pretty common plant fossil. We have two examples here. On one side, we have the raw piece where it's really rough, and you can actually see the grains of the wood, like if you had cut wood for a campfire. On the other side is a polished piece. And if you look closely, you can actually see the rings of the tree in the polished piece of petrified wood. Next, we have amber. Amber is a little different. It is a soft part that hardens over time. And it's actually one of the things that fossilizes the fastest. It can fossilize in less than 100 years. And anything that is stuck to the amber also becomes a fossil with it. So the darker orange shapes and the black in that bracelet there, those are plant leaves and insects that were trapped in the amber and became fossilized as that sticky sap from trees hardened. Ferns also fossilize very well, but it's because the carbon in them is left behind and it leaves nice imprints. These are fern fossils on shale that were found not too far from where we're at here in Huntington, Pennsylvania. and you can see the details of the fern leaves in the fossil here. Now, this next part, can you guess? So I want you to look really closely at this. Kind of imagine holding it in your hand. Think about how heavy it might be. What does it feel like? Kind of imagine trying to turn it around. What do you think this is? What could it be? I'm going to give you a second to guess. Do you have something in mind? Well, this is fossilized dinosaur dung, or a coprolite. And on the one side, we have a whole piece, what it looks like before it's been cut. And on the other side, we have a piece that's been cut in half and polished, and you can see what the inside of the coprolite looks like. And the neat thing about fossilized dung is that it can tell us what the animal ate. So there might be bones left in the coprolite, or there might be pieces of fern leaves or other plants. And sometimes that's the only way those pieces are preserved, especially if they're soft parts, because they've been hardened in the fossilized dung. And this is our second one. So again, we have both sides of this pictured here. So you can kind of take a guess, but what does it look like? Look at the shape of it. Could it be a seashell? Could it be a bone, a kneecap, or a head? What do you think it is? I'll give you a second to guess. This is actually one of my favorite fossils. And this is a fossilized whale ear bone. So it's not like our ear, not the flexible part on the outside of our head, but deep in our ear, we have teeny tiny little bones that are very, very small. But think about how big a whale is. And those whales are so big that they have much bigger ears than we do. And those tiny little bones in there, that picture that you see pictured here, that fossil, is one of those tiny little bones from a whale. But if you hold it up, it actually kind of looks like a human ear on the one side, which is pretty cool, and it's one of my favorite fossils. So if you want to do an additional activity with this video, you can actually make your own fossils at home. These are called salt dough fossils. You need a cup of salt, 2 cups of flour, and 3/4 cup of water. You're going to mix those ingredients all together and then divide it into smaller clumps. And each one of those clumps you're going to roll in your hand and then press down and flatten them out into thin discs. Then you want to have some things to make fossils up. You might use a seashell to make an impression, or like a toy dinosaur, or even a hand. You could even use your own hand to push into the dough. Once you have your impressions in there, you want to get an adult to help you and put them in the oven to bake at 200 degrees until they are dry. If they're really thin, they should be dry probably in less than an hour, 45 to 60 minutes. But the thicker they are, the longer it's going to take. So if those discs are still pretty thick, or you made a really big one, those you're going to need to leave in the oven probably 2 or 3 hours until they are finished. Well, thank you for watching our video. Feel free to share your pictures that you drew as yourself as a paleontologist, or a picture of your fossil that you make. If you make a salt dough fossil, please feel free to share those in the comments. Thank you again for watching.